Good morning, all.
You comfortable being between the two of us?
So what we have in store for you this morning, we're going to kick off with a special session with the Chief Supply Chain Officer of Tractor Supply, Colin Yankee. I'm Tom Goldsby, and you've met Ted already. And we put on a monthly podcast called Tennessee on Supply Chain Management. So what we're going to do is we're going to record a session of that with you all present. Hope you don't mind. An hour with Colin, and we're also going to invite your questions. So certainly Ted and I have a lot of good fodder and a lot of interesting directions to take the conversation, but we're interested in what you want to see. So we've got a big old giant screen here in front of us. Submit your questions through the app for this session, and they'll make their way, and the most popular questions, those that rise to the top, we'll make a point of getting those presented to Colin.
I'm looking over at my team right here, and I'm giving them the evil eye.
Only softballs, right?
All right, let's elevate those questions right to the top. That'll be really good. But how many folks are familiar with the Tennessee on Supply Chain Management podcast? Any loyal listeners out there? A smattering. It'd be great to get more hands up after this session for sure, but it's a monthly podcast where Ted and I usually wax philosophic about the news of the day for a little bit, and then we invite a guest. Usually from a partner organization or from our own shop at UT. We've been doing it for what, about
2 years?
about 3.5 years now.
Season 3.
I think.
This season 3 episode, I don't know, something like that.
Something that's really interesting is
I think this is where somebody dies, maybe.
Oh, God.
we're going to speculate
No, I
on.
don't think so. You know, it's funny, everybody loves rankings, right? So you have all these niche rankings. We are very proud to say that we are the 24th most popular supply chain management podcast and the #1 academic supply chain management podcast.
That's right.
Which means I think there's 24 people that listen.
Yeah, that chant, we're number 24, just doesn't have the same ring as we're #1, so we might go ahead and...
Well, we're #1 academic.
That's right.
Supply chain
That's right, depending on how you cut the
three.
pie. So I think, are we ready? Are we rolling back there and recording for the sake of the podcast? Everything good there? I'm looking for Brian. Okay, fantastic. So we're good to go there, and time's a wasting, I guess. So why don't we go ahead and jump in? Shall I get things started?
Please.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Tennessee on Supply Chain Management podcast. I'm Professor Tom Goldsby, coming to you from Rocky Top with my dear friend, Dr. Ted Stank. Good morning, Ted.
Morning, Tom. Great to be here.
Can you kind of report on the scene for our listeners? What are you looking out upon this
Yeah,
morning?
well, I mean, like always, we record from a very intimate environment with I think right now, about 350 of our closest friends here. And our guest, Colin Yankee. Great to have you with us, Colin. Thank you.
Good morning.
This is the opening session of our spring 2025 Supply Chain Forum. By the way, the forum started in 1998, so...
Not in a big room like this, though, right? It was
No,
a
I
little
think,
different back then.
I think there were probably about 20 of us in that room back then. So, yeah, we've grown. So, yeah, Tom, why don't you introduce Colin?
Yeah, so Colin Yankee is the Chief Supply Chain Officer with Tractor Supply, and just doing a little bit of background research on you. You are a West Point graduate.
Correct.
You had a military career as an Army officer for a time, and then returned to the civilian sector, went to work for Target.
Correct.
Had several roles in distribution and logistics with the Target Corporation, and then went to Neiman Marcus, was vice president of Neiman Marcus, and then in 2015, I believe, so you've marked 10 years now with Tractor Supply, and a really fast-growing, fascinating company, and a great partner of ours here at UT. But welcome, Colin. It's great to have you with us. And maybe to those who aren't so informed, I would hope that everyone out there has at least stepped into a Tractor Supply store. But what could a shopper expect? And then we'll get into your role as the Chief Supply Chain Officer.
Sure. Before I do that,
Sure.
I just want to say it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Like you said, I've been at Tractor Supply for 10 years, and we have hired a ton of leaders from this program. And our amazing culture and the just drive of our supply chain, the innovation of our supply chain is a direct reflection of the products that have come out of this program. And so I'm just really privileged to get to work with them. Just quality people, so keep doing what you're doing.
Fantastic.
Very much appreciate
Hey,
that.
one other thing I missed is you're also a Spartan grad. You got
Yes.
an MS in supply
that's right.
chain. Ted over there was a faculty member. I got my PhD up in Spartan land, so A little quiet go green this
That's a
morning.
go.
Well, I
white.
got to hit on the West Point thing, right?
Yeah,
Steve
you should.
Klemenczyk, are you in the room? Where are you? Raise your hand, Steve. Any
Hey, beat Navy.
any other West Point grads in here? All right, we outnumber him, Steve. Okay, Steve and I are
full
Naval
2 to
Academy
1.
grads.
Yeah,
Jeff
that's
DeLulo
impressive.
is not here, so we're safe.
Yeah, so a little bit about Tractor Supply, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. We're the largest farm and ranch retailer in the United States. We have about 2,400 stores across the U.S. in 49 states, about 50,000 team members who work at our company, $15 billion in revenue, 87 years now in business, close to that. So just a very long history and lineage. We serve the rural lifestyle, so everything that our customers need to live life on their terms out in rural environments. And that means, for us, our stores are small format, so we can locate them in these rural communities. If you walk into a Tractor Supply store, you can expect to find everything from Carhartt workwear and Ariat boots to dog food and bird seed to 850-pound gun safes, trailers, ranch gates, make model specific parts. It is a cornucopia of different kind of things we move through our supply chain.
We get dog food from there,
Yep.
and we've also got these giant aluminum planters that my wife plants all kinds of products in. So
we try to serve that lifestyle, and that really dictates how our supply chain is set up because of that small format store. And we have to manage those demand patterns. You talked about planning a little bit earlier. Love to get into that topic because it's a passion point for ours and how we manage that. About $1 billion of our sales is online. So we have an omni-channel presence, shipping from our store, shipping from our DC network, shipping from our vendor base to our customers, as well as a small private fleet that we're expanding out to expand our business there.
Fantastic. And I think the tagline is life out here.
Correct.
Right? And so I looked this morning, there's no downtown Knoxville location, right? Your stores tend to be out in the periphery a bit. In fact, I think I saw that they used to be based upon cow count in the county. Have you ever heard that? Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, we've gotten a little more sophisticated than that with our real estate model.
Okay, we'll get into the 20s maybe.
But we have just an incredible real estate portfolio and a set of algorithms that we take in all this different kind of information, from demographics, cattle count, equine count, how many oil rigs are in a certain area, all these different kind of things for how do we locate our stores. About 50% of our stores are in what I call ex-urban areas, so not urban, not suburban, but on the fringe. Yeah. And then the remainders are really in more rural communities.
Yeah, so I thought there were maybe 5 store locations within 22 miles of where we're sitting right now, but as I pointed out, none in the downtown area. It's going to be out there.
And for those of you who don't know Knoxville, East Tennessee is a pretty big beef cattle area. In fact, our department head, John Bell, who's not able to be here, he's at a conference, and you got to feel sorry for him. I think he's in Hawaii right now.
Is he in Hawaii? Yeah.
But he has a herd of 35 cattle that he runs in his spare time.
Yeah, and because of the spread that you just described, we have the opportunity to continue to expand our stores. So we're adding between 80 and 100 new stores every single year for the next decade or so. So we have about 2,400 stores today. We publicly stated we can go out to about 3,200.
All right, and I know you take a lot of pride. I follow you on LinkedIn, and you're great to follow on LinkedIn because you tell such a great story. You're out there at the stores routinely. It's not like you're living in Brentwood and just calling the shots from the headquarters location. I love to see you out in the field. And so in the store itself, kind of you describe some of the categories you're covering, but like how many SKUs are you all managing? And we'll call out a few specific ones here in a moment.
Yeah, when you walk in one of our stores, you'll have between 18 and 20,000 different SKUs per store. But let's call it, say, 10 to 20% of our store, we're moving to a much more localized kind of assortment, reflective of that demographic. So that's going to increase our overall SKU count, which means our planners are managing about 80 million different site SKU combinations every single day for inventory and in-stocks and productivity for that. So it's an incredible amount of things they have to manage. But if you walk in, one thing that is really great, it's like a general store. So many of our customers think that Tractor Supply is a local store. They're like, my Tractor Supply. And when I travel and I'm wearing Tractor Supply logo, they'll tell me, hey, the store in Roanoke, Texas, Christina's a great manager, or I'll get feedback about product that they want or whatever, and they think I know everybody in the company, which is exactly what we want. We want that kind of belly-to-belly service in our stores. But you're going to walk in and you're going to see clothing and apparel, and you're going to smell molasses from the sweet feed that we're selling in the back. So it has kind of a little bit of retail theater. You can hear chickens. We sell live chickens in our stores. So you'll hear the chirp of chicks in the middle of our stores. And then you'll have a home decor area and fertilizer, heating, whatever else you need for your seasonal needs.
Well, you got on the SKU of particular interest to me. I believe we're in the throes of chick days right now. I saw on the and I have to believe with egg prices, there's been incredible interest in chicks that would become chickens and lay egging beasts. So that's a very different SKU to manage than apparel or feed, right?
Yeah. So we sell about 11 to 12 million chicks per year. So a lot of chickens move through. You can imagine the timing of this is very important because as they come out of the hatcheries for spring, it's cold, and we need to ensure that they make it to the stores in alive and good condition. And then they get to the stores, and we have to have a sell-through rate before they become full-grown chickens, walking around our stores, which would be a disaster as well. It'd be a bit of a zoo. But the way we think about the chickens, it's kind of two different things. It's the gateway drug to the lifestyle.
Okay.
So people who get into chickens, they're like fanatical about it, and it's a whole thing on social media, Instagram, all the kind of things. But people love their chickens, and with that though comes not just the chicken, but then the coop. And the feed we sell them, and their entire life cycle of kind of maturity of we can follow them along that journey as they kind of get into the lifestyle and that chicken.
They're your equivalent of a Gillette razor, right?
It's exactly the right equivalent.
Interesting.
And you can be the one-stop shop for all those needs.
Colin, as I look at your history, I'd love to have you think about how culture impacts your supply chain. Obviously you have different suppliers. How do you work? You mentioned hatcheries. How do you work with them? When I think about the juxtaposition of Tractor Supply with some of your earlier experiences with Target and Neiman Marcus, right? Totally different demographics, different population base that they deal with. How does that manifest itself in your supply chain?
Yeah, I think every supply chain leader needs to understand what their value proposition is. And so as a retail leader, if I'm talking to some of my peers, we're all juggling 4 different things. It's in-stocks, inventory productivity, logistics costs, and service levels. And so for Tractor Supply, our job is to be a dependable supplier. We're a needs-based retailer, and we believe in everyday low prices. So for me, that kind of order stacking in generic terms, this isn't the case for every single category, would be I want to be in stock, I want to keep my logistics costs as efficient as possible. Then I want to focus on my cash-to-cash cycle on inventory productivity, and then I'm focused on service levels. It's almost the exact opposite when I was at Neiman Marcus, right? Service levels at the top.
No chickens walking around.
No chickens walking around. But if you're buying a $10,000 dress or a $4,000 pair of shoes, service levels are super important.
That's right.
And then I was a private equity-backed company. I'm a publicly traded company now. So logistics costs and inventory productivity were kind of more equal in the middle. And actually, in stock was the least thing you're worried about because scarcity is part of the game, right? Mrs. Jones does not want to be the second person at the Boca Raton Junior League social with the blue Chanel shoes. She wants to be the only one, right? And so it's a different kind of game, and that really reflects in how we set up our supply chain. Culturally, though, I feel very fortunate. I had a wonderful experience in the Army. I'm sure a lot of veterans in the room. Or people who are spouses or family members. But if you're not familiar, people have this image of the military being very directive. That was not my experience. These were people who volunteered to be there. And that experience then influenced how I led at Target and has experienced how I've tried to set the culture up here at Tractor Supply. When I got out of the Army, I moved back to California where I grew up, and I worked in a distribution center with people I went to high school with. And except for a few decisions and people helping me out along the way, I could very easily be driving a forklift in a DC in Southern California. And I have a baseline standard for our organization from a leadership principle standpoint. When I walk into a distribution center, would I allow my wife or my son, somebody I love, to work in that facility for that leader, for that ops manager, for that general manager under these working conditions? And that's a standard. It is super, super simple to communicate because every supervisor understands it. Because every team member in our supply chain is somebody's son, daughter, husband. And I think that translates all the way how we treat our suppliers, how do we treat our carriers. This is a long-term game with long-term people for me. Yeah. And so I try not to be transactional all the way from the front line, all the way to our vendor base.
Yeah, I mean, last night somebody was telling me, Daryl, I think it was you, Daryl Edwards, this is still a people game. We talk all about technology. We talk about all these great concepts and complications and complexities in the world. At the end of the day, it's a people game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's why we're so happy to have you as a great partner, because you do hire a lot of our great students, and everybody wants to come back home, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about strategy. Again, you've been with the company 10 years, thereabout. We had a pandemic in there as well. Can you talk a little bit about how the business has changed, how your supply chain's evolved, maybe how you weathered that storm, and we'll get to maybe how you're weathering the current storms.
Sure. For us, the pandemic, obviously people were moving out of urban areas into a lot more rural areas, whether permanently or temporarily. I think there was a little bit of the zeitgeist of self-sufficiency and do-it-yourself in that, as people saw the scarcity and the vulnerabilities of the supply chain, which fit right into our, kind of do-it-yourself mindset in our stores. And so we saw tremendous growth. When I started with the company a decade ago, we were about $6 billion. Today we're about $15 billion. So just tremendous growth that we've had to keep up from a supply chain standpoint. We are always chasing volume and capacity, right? Just trying to keep up with the growth. And COVID turbocharged that for us. What was really cool is going into the pandemic, we had purpose-built flow paths for our supply chain. The only reason a retail supply chain exists is to effectively deploy inventory. If I could 3D print dog food onto the shelf in a store, I would do that, right? Like, I'm not really super into trucks. I'm not super into DCs. I don't really care about automation. I care about serving the customer with the inventory. And because we had built these purpose-built flow paths, we were able to kind of shunt around different congestion points we had. We also had a lot of variety in our assortment. So because we're needs-based, a customer would come in, if they're like, this thing is out of stock because we have a shortage, they could find something to solve the job. So while as a supply chain operator, I'm always like, reduce SKUs, reduce SKU count, right? I learned a valuable lesson during COVID about the power of substitution in that assortment to help our customers out. And then it just really elevated Tractor Supply from a visibility standpoint, because we had a lot more customers shopping in our store who had never lived the lifestyle, and just elevated our overall profile.
Yeah. Now, certainly all of our lifestyles adjusted, and something that remains true throughout it all, and Ted likes to call me out for this, I make reference to the American consumer in particular as being diabolical, right? Okay. I mean, we're more demanding in every aspect of the consumption experience, and oh, by the way, we don't want to pay, hand and fist for it. So, how do you kind of view the evolution, I guess, maybe, the changes and expectations that we have as consumers? And again, we would love to see you go to, maybe, 30 million SKUs, but how do you fight the force there and say, this is what we're going to take to market? And
and by the way, there's a thread there I'm going to pull after you answer this one about cost.
Sure.
Managing cost, particularly with the issues we're dealing with today.
Sure. I'll kind of tackle this from two different vectors. There's the assortment component, and then I'll call it convenience component. So on the assortment component, I think one of the powers of being an omni-channel retailer is we can really focus on where we position our inventory based upon the demands for the customer. So if you walked into Tractor Supply 30 years ago, you would see a huge section of tractor maintenance parts, which is high margin, low turn inventory. That was really what the niche was built about. But the business has changed. And so as an omni-channel retailer, we can reduce that assortment and footprint in our store, dedicate more productive product to that space for what the customer wants for a variety standpoint, move those things to different points in our supply chain, and with speed, get you the things you need just as fast using our online capabilities. the interesting thing about convenience is, when I talk to our customers being out in the stores, they are not necessarily interested in having things today or tomorrow. They're interested in having completeness of their order before their job or project starts. So most of our customers are not big farmers. Like I have a 60-acre farm, and I care about having my product on Friday before I'm working on Saturday. That means if I order it on Thursday, I want it on Friday. That means if I order it on the Sunday before, I still want it on the Friday.
Right.
So we can design our network to be very flexible around that.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about cost. We're in a really interesting time now, and we're not going to be able to avoid it. It's going to be a theme for the next 2 days, right? Potentially, with what's happening with the tariff administration, we're going to see some potential increase in cost. I'm assuming that there's a significant number of your SKUs that are imported. How are you thinking about costs? How are you going to manage costs as we move forward with what potentially is a new economic model?
Sure. I'll speak in generic terms here because we have our earnings call in 2 weeks, and I'd get in a lot of trouble if I got out ahead of messaging on this. So I will speak in generics, and hope that doesn't disappoint you too much. But I feel like Tractor Supply is in a very good position to win and thrive in this environment. It's significant but not existential for us. About 8% of our cost of goods purchases are product that we direct import. About 40 to 45% of the product that we purchase is consumable, usable, or edible, so very domestic production. And we, a few years ago, went through a process where we took our major categories and individual kind of SKUs that are kind of stalwarts of our assortment and broke down the bills of materials.
Oh, wow.
And so we could look at how much steel, how much copper, how much aluminum, how much corn, how much riboflavin, whatever it is, goes into each one of those finished goods. And so as we're talking to our supplier base and we're looking at the new tariff regime, we can say, all right, what kind of impact is this going to have on cost? I think the common misperception is, I'm making up the numbers here, a 20% tariff increase equals a 20% increase in cost.
Right.
The truck doesn't cost more, the fixed cost of labor doesn't cost more. None of those things are costing more today. So 20% tariff increase does not necessarily increase cost by 20%. That being said. I just think it's a lot to digest right now. Your comment earlier about anybody who tells you what they, I agree with that. And so I'm going to take off my Tractor Supply hat right now, and just like all these comments here are my own.
Put it up to the side.
Yeah, I put it offside. So, when I think about it, it's not just tariffs, it's trade barriers. So there's the goods barriers for tariffs. Then there's the service barriers where we have American companies cannot operate in foreign markets. And then there's the foreign investment barriers that the administration's trying to address. At the same time, we've got the tax bill going through Congress, which could extend the 2017 tax cuts. If that doesn't, could revert back. We also have the potential for no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, no tax on tips. Interest rates are changing. Energy policy from a domestic production standpoint is changing. Reduction in federal spending happening all at the same time. It is just a lot to digest.
Yeah.
So as a leader, I'm like, this isn't a crisis. This is a disruption. And the way you handle a crisis is very directed. Just start making decisions. That could confuse a lot of people in an organization. If you have a disruption, the things that you once assumed to be true are no longer true. And if you don't understand it, and it's highly complex, you should probably pause the decision cycle and start to really reflect about what's going on. And leaders who can take a breath and understand the ripple effects or the implications of that, and then direct their organizations in a response mode, I think will be much better off. And I'm going on a bit of diatribe.
Yeah, no,
No,
words
no,
of
this
wisdom.
is great.
So
This is great.
There was a thing I learned in the Army, which was a saying, which was, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah, right.
And that saying comes from when you're working in an urban environment and you have a bunch of people who are really excited, adrenaline's up, and all of them have guns. And the worst thing you can have happen is you shoot at each other, friendly fire. But if you slow down and you're methodical, slow becomes smooth and smooth becomes fast. And you move through that chaotic, complex environment together. that would be, when I'm talking my organization, my team, that's the approach I'm trying to take. Like, just chill out, do the analysis, figure it out, and then adapt from there.
I'm just thinking how amazing for your organization to have a leader with that perspective. We've got Ted as a leader. It's the Naval Academy, right? It's not West Point.
I mean,
Maybe we'll get a.
it's a good second-tier school.
I'm not sure how to respond to that, actually.
No, but something I want to go back to is you mentioned as a retailer, bill of materials, and I'm just wondering how many other retailers get so concerned about the SKUs. Typically, you're just going to lean harder on your supplier and say, get your stuff together out there, right? You're going to just tighten the screws. But meanwhile, you're saying you tried to understand what went into the products that you sourced, maybe map that supply chain and realize where you had those vulnerabilities, huh?
Absolutely, and it's actually a lesson we learned from a couple other retailers out there who we really kind of saw that. And the cool thing about supply chain is there's just a lot of sharing.
Yep.
So when I go to retail supply chain events, I have peers who will share best practices. I have peers from other retailers who will visit our DCs, or I visit their DCs, because we're not trying to just compete on who has the best sourcing or who has the best DC or has the best transportation. It's all knitted together in an end-to-end supply chain, which is very unique and purpose-built for their particular case. Right. So there's a lot of sharing in that. And it's also, to your point earlier, it's a people business, and your reputation matters. Yeah. And so if you're a jerk and don't share, people aren't going to share with you. Yeah. So we learned that from a couple other retailers who helped us think about the approach. Obviously, they just said, here's kind of what we did. Sure. And we went after that, and it gave us just a ton of visibility that we hadn't previously had, where instead of just beating somebody over the head on rate or cost, which is adversarial and not necessarily effective, how do we understand where the costs are, and then how do we manage our product portfolio? It's kind of the strength of our business. If we just sold dog food, we wouldn't be in a good position. But we can manage our costs and our margins and everything else across a portfolio.
Broad spectrum, yeah.
So one of the things that really impressed me, Colin, when I was looking at all of your responsibilities is really how end-to-end your responsibilities are. You've got engineering and as a responsibility. You've got relationships with merchandising. You got a lot of financial responsibilities. Can you talk a little bit about how you work across what evidently or not evidently, imminently always becomes silos in organizations? Sure. So you mentioned about merchandising, that you'd like to reduce SKUs, right? But merchants always want to increase SKUs. How do you work with your merchant base? How do you work with your chief financial officer to make sure that in that end-to-end mix, you really are optimizing the total picture to customers?
Sure. When I interview somebody for a job and I ask them, tell me about your team, if they start telling me about their direct report team, I think I'm going to have to re-educate this person. I didn't raise them, I have to re-educate them. Because my first team is my peer team. Yeah. And my job is to be an enterprise leader and to think about the entire spectrum of running the business. While I'm held accountable for the supply chain, I'm incentivized on the total company performance. And I think that ethos really kind of works its way down into my direct report team, their team, on how do we achieve the best thing for the customer and work across.
But that says a lot, that your metrics are about enterprise success, right? Not just supply chain.
Now, I don't want to be Pollyanna, right?
Right.
Like there's.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got a lot of KPIs related to the supply chain.
And so I think that is really kind of an important leadership component to it. We, within that, kind of to operationalize it, are not trying to optimize a part, we're trying to optimize the whole. Yeah. So if there's something that is beneficial for our stores and it's going to cost the logistics organization more, but it's a net positive, then that's what we do. If there's something that is going to reduce our cost of goods on the merchandising side and increase that initial margin, but cost us more in transportation, but it's a win, then that's what we try to do. And so those trade-offs across those organizations become really, really important. There's systems that support that. There's financial analysis that support that. There's routines that support that. I think the most important thing that supports that is our talent lattices. So, we have a lot of people who love working in DCs or love working in inventory, and they can build great careers there. We have a lot of people who will work here in inventory, we'll work over in planning, we'll work over investor relations, go work in strategy, go to marketing, come back to supply chain. And with that, all of a sudden, you have a different set of empathy
Sure.
that you're applying with.
Yeah. How far down the organization do those enterprise-wide metrics push? So, if I were to come work for you as a new grad, would I also have, as part of my KPIs, something related to high-level metric?
You would. Everybody's incentivized on sales and net income.
That's
top
powerful.
line sales and what is our overall profitability. Now, there are a lot of people who work in major Fortune 500 companies like ours that are not as close, like their metrics aren't as definable, and so they may be incentivized on sales and net income. The closer you are to the fire, the more accountability metrics you have, right? So the closer you're to the customer. So if you're in DC, your cost per unit and your safety. If you're supporting merchandising, your individual areas profitability is important so that you have some clarity on that and you own it. But at a high level, top line and bottom line.
That's powerful, right? Because now you can talk across those different teams to say, hey, your logistics costs are going to increase. In a traditional organization, that's bad, and I'm going to do everything to prevent that, even though it might hurt something downstream. Yeah. Whereas your teams have the ability to say, all right, we're going to eat that additional cost because it's good for the overall picture. And
I think
that's powerful.
I think metrics are important. Your incentives are important, kind of the Warren Buffett showed me your incentives and I'll show you your outcomes kind of conversation. But I think even more powerful than that is what you recognize. So if you slap people down for trying to do the right thing, that's going to send a message. If you elevate people and recognize them for thinking that way, all of a sudden that becomes the model
norm,
for somebody
right.
that's coming in.
Yeah, that's great. Let's dive into this planning realm a little bit here. I had said at the outset that we are starting to see across the organizations we work with that planning, you can be great in manufacturing, you can be great in logistics and DC operations, managing your transportation picture. All of that has a major impact on your P&L, on your balance sheet, et cetera. But what we're starting to see is that if you can make incremental even improvements in planning, it cascades into so many other good things. So can you talk about your planning regime and your processes and how you guys are dealing with that?
Yeah, I'll mention a name, Dave Close, who you both know. For those who don't know, he's the Bauer Sox. I think he's a Bauer Sox professor.
He was my dissertation advisor.
At Michigan State. I took a logistics network engineering class from him, and something he just hammered into me, and he repeated over and over was, it is incredibly difficult to execute your way out of planning problems. He just repeated that over and over, and I believe it. I've seen it happen. And so one of the unique things about our structure is our merchandise financial planning team, the team that is setting the purchasing goals of how much product we're going to buy, how much we're going to sell in each given week, and for the longer term is part of the supply chain. They do most of their work with their merchant partners, but they're part of the supply chain because their forecast is the North Star for us that we then break down into what are we doing for trucking, what are we doing for distribution labor, what are we doing for omni-channel, that entire thing. And we're trying not to have people operate off a bunch of different hymnals, right? And so what their forecast is what's important. So we believe in that planning. The other kind of philosophical kind of principle that we put in place is we believe in process over technology. There's a lot of planning software out there. I don't know if anybody here sells planning software, but if you're buying, my advice would be that if you try to put good technology over bad process, it's still going to be a bad process with really good technology, and it's going to be a disaster. So process over technology. A lot of us operate in capital constrained environments, and you're not changing out your technology all the time. The process always gives you improvement where, you may be enamored by this new technology, may be cool, but that may be 5 years out for you, just on your capital investment cycle. So those routines and those processes are important. What are your monthly routines? What are your weekly routines? And that way, every leader has a forum in which to present a planning issue, whether it's sales on the demand side, capacity or supply on the supply chain side. And then one thing I'm just incredibly excited about, our team a couple of years ago changed out our forecasting and replenishment system and really took a leap forward in our technology capabilities. I stepped on that for a couple of years because I was like, our process isn't there yet.
Yeah.
We still have a lot of improvement to do. I'm not giving us an A+, right? But what I'd say is our ability to take in structured data, so things like seasonality, day of the week profiles, vendor performance, all that kind of stuff has dramatically increased. Our next kind of chapter will be how do we take in more structured data, like how many pickup trucks were sold in every zip code in the United States last month, because that's going to be an indicator of how many truck boxes we'll sell next month. How many dogs were adopted versus how many dogs were surrendered last month in every zip code, because that's going to dictate, our demand pattern there. All kinds of things. Wow. And I think the next leap forward is going to be unstructured data, which is customer reviews, social media posts, calls to our call center, all those kind of things. My ask for my team as we start to get through this is I think we need to start trust our technology more and trust the system and tune it versus try to touch it all the time and think we know better.
Yeah. But the flip side of that is if you don't have the process in place, then all of a sudden the technology starts driving your decisions and starts telling you this is what your forecast is without your planners really understanding what's underneath that.
Yeah, it's like the GPS taking you down the dirt road.
Yeah,
or something,
right, right, yeah, yeah.
Well, the other inevitable question, we've touched on tariffs, AI, and perhaps in planning and execution, where are you using it, how are you using it, where are you finding it effective?
Obviously, it's a fertile, high value target area for planning. We are not actually applying big AI onto our planning at this point. Okay. We are using what I call more traditional machine learning, forecast model competition, being able to ingest that data, doing those kind of things for our planning. Where we are using AI, and I think is really quite progressive in retail, is more on our sales side. So we have a lot of opportunities still on the planning, but on the sales side, when you walk into one of our stores, we're using a combination of computer vision and large language models to help our store team members be more effective. So imagine you walk up to a Tractor Supply store and there's a bunch of riding lawnmowers out front. We have cameras there that will observe the customer, see how long they're dwelling in front of that item, and then if it's dwelling for a certain amount of time, send a signal to a team member in the store and an earpiece that they're wearing to go engage with that customer. One of the cool things about working at Tractor Supply is for a long time we've hired our customers into our stores. They live the lifestyle, so they could give you advice. They understood, what the problems you're dealing with. As we've grown, that becomes more and more challenging. Sure. So we took all the master data from our vendor base, all their product knowledge, put it into a large language model that a team member in the store can, through audio, engage with. So if you walked in and you bought some chickens, you're a new chicken owner, and you said, what kind of medicine do I need to get for this chicken because it has this thing going on with it? And a person who has never raised chickens, but they maybe know a lot about welding, is helping you. They can ask that question, and it will give them a recommendation back to engage with the customer. Wow. How much K31 grass seed do I spread over an acre in order to cover it? Right, like those kind of things, so we can give better customer service. Wow. So anyway, it's fertile ground on the planning side, but I'm actually more excited because we're a sales-driven organization about how we help our customers.
Yeah, close to the customer. So I'd like to, so you mentioned 2,400 stores and growing. I'd like to maybe go upstream a bit to the distribution network. Yeah. So what's kind of your DC count and how do they serve the stores, and also that omni-channel strategy you mentioned earlier? What's being fulfilled from store, what's coming from DC? Sure.
So like I mentioned earlier, we have purpose-built flow paths, and they are designed to allow inventory to behave the way it wants to behave to give us the most options. So the heart and soul, kind of center of gravity of our network is our distribution center network. We have 10 DCs. They're between 650,000 and 1.2 million square feet all across the country to service our stores. Each DC operates 24/7, various levels of automation, services about 250 stores each. Okay. Then we have 17 what we call mixing centers, but they're really high velocity, just-in-time cross docks. And they allow us to serve our stores with just-in-time replenishment for our fastest moving items. For the easiest analogy I'd use is the product that's kind of like our bread, milk, and bananas. So you have to be in stock, you have to be fresh, and you're not making a lot of margin on it. But if you disappoint the customer and you don't have it, you're going to go shop someplace else if you disappoint them multiple times. So we have that network, and we work very closely with our producers and our partners on that for demand sensing, where they can actually sense our demand from our sales before we're writing POs because it's moving that fast. And then we have a longer lead time import network. So we have 3 import centers and 1 bulk center today, soon to be 3 bulk centers, servicing that big bulky product or those products that are imported and seasonal. So we don't want to forward deploy it into the country because it may be influenced by weather. We'll hold it upstream and then postpone that allocation. On omni-channel, my long-term vision is to activate inventory everywhere. I don't want any inventory to be hidden from the customer. Because for me, when I walk in a distribution center, I don't see boxes, I see cash in racks. Because that's all it is. And I want to convert that cash as fast as possible. So today, every DC is a fulfillment center as well, services stores and online customers from the same inventory. 5 of them, though, half the network, have a little bit more automation and we hold a little bit different assortment in those as well. And then our mixing centers, we just turn those on to be fulfillment centers as well.
Okay. Purpose-built flow pathways.
Yep.
That's just fantastic.
So I'm thinking in my mind, we talk a lot about maxims around here. Most of our white papers have maxims in them, right? And it comes from those of you who know Tennessee sports history. General Nealon, and I hate to say he was a
West Point graduate, yeah.
And he was a general, actually. General Nealon.
Pretty awesome story if you don't know.
Most successful football coach in Tennessee history had these 7 maxims for success. One of them was called like Oski, which I still don't really understand what that is. Some 1930s, 40s vernacular. But I'm thinking of the Colin Yankee maxims here. Customers first, right? It's all about making sure the customer comes in the store, gets what they want. Teams have to be cross-functional. You have to understand what's going on up and downstream. So you encourage your team, you re-educate your team members to be cross-functional. They have to have metrics that focus them on the big picture, not just on their functional area. Process over technology, right? Then what was that last one you just said, Tom?
Purpose-built
flow
paths.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's 5 Colin Yankee
trademark
maxims.
that.
we need to get 2 more.
God.
So let's get into a little bit of talent management.
Okay.
Right? One of the things that I think was a real differentiator for us as our program has grown was perceiving ourselves as your talent management partner, from a recruitment standpoint, from a retention standpoint, and a development standpoint, et cetera. What is your perspective? I mean, at the end of the day, a chief supply chain officer has to do a lot of things, but one of the biggest things is to build functioning, successful teams, right? What is your perspective on leading teams and leadership and talent management?
From a talent management standpoint, I think this is good. I hate to be start with a negative, but I think it takes 1 drop of oil to spoil a well. And the people you invite onto your team, if somebody walks in my doorway and I'm already annoyed, that tells me something, right? And I just don't have people like that on my team.
Yeah.
And it starts with that assessment process. I think everybody thinks they are a good interviewer. I don't think most people are good interviewers. So how do you interview? What kind of questions you're asking? How are you assessing? How are you getting collaboration with other people's perspectives to make the right choice? How are you using data in that process as well so that you're inviting the right people on the team? And then from there, I really think from a talent management perspective, like I mentioned earlier, building career lattices or ladders, depending on what the person wants. But we spend all this time assessing people, hiring them, and training them. And my objective as chief supply chain officer is to empower them to make decisions. And so, with one other kind of maxim, it would be think 2 levels higher and communicate 2 levels lower. And for me, what that means is I'm trying to understand what my boss wants. So my CEO, what is he, what are the objectives for him? What are the desired outcomes? What does success look like? Not just him, but our board of directors, who's his boss. If I can do that and understand that really well, for my functional area, it means I can communicate in a way that supports that larger objective. When I communicate, if I just communicate that to my direct report team, I lose something. But if I can communicate that 2 levels deep in the organization, now the directors who are responsible, where a lot of the work really happens for their functional areas, can go, all right, here's I understand the intent of what we're trying to accomplish. I don't need to ask for permission. I don't need to get authority to do it. This information is showing this. This is what Colin wants to achieve. Let's go do it. And the decision clock speed on that becomes so much faster. And my job is to hold people accountable for their performance, their behaviors, and their decisions. And if we can do that because they understand the intent, then they can learn.
Yeah.
If I'm just, like, if I'm making every decision and then beating them up when they're not making decisions, then that's, kind of a bad
I'm
thing.
seeing your military background written all over your leadership style, right? I mean, one of the things that makes the United States military the best military in the world is that we don't have officers who make all the decisions, right? We have 19-year-old, infantrymen or sailors making decisions about life and death, about multi-million-dollar systems all the time, and I can see that in your culture and your thought process.
Well, and I've learned the longer I've been in this job, the more I think I know less. And what I mean by that is, when I was actually doing the work at that director level, I knew all the nitty-gritty details. I knew every jump code in the system and where to go look at this and that kind of stuff. If you ask me right now to log into the planning system that my team uses, I couldn't do it. I don't have a login. They don't let me do it. I couldn't log into our warehouse management system. And so I'm always worried that what people aren't sharing with me and what I don't know, and holding that as a framework and making a decision off that versus empowering the team I have who actually knows that kind of stuff and being like, here's what the objective is. And hopefully that pays off in the long run.
But what does that mean in terms of onboarding new talent at whatever rank it might mean, right? I mean, if you're going to entrust them with that influence, how do you prepare them to take on that kind of influence?
Yeah, I think this is going to be super informal. But one of the best ways I think to build teams and onboard people at organization is windshield time. Right? So you mentioned getting out in the stores and the DCs.
Yeah.
I will intentionally drive with people just so that we're sitting in the car together talking. Because it's different when you're flying together, and you're breaking bed together at whatever Hardee's or Dairy Queen when you're on the road, and you're out in the field spending time with them. I could write the most fantastic onboarding plan, which we have those, and we have the schedules, and we have all those kind of things, and who they visit with, and the questions they ask, and what they get exposed to. But there's nothing like getting your butt in a seat with a bunch of other people, cross-functionally, and driving.
Yeah.
The team who's here today from Tractor Supply, I saw their car in the parking lot. They got in the car together, and they're a different team when they go home from this because of the effectively 6 hours they spent in the car together than they were when they started.
Yeah. Very good. Wow.
That's a great point. Great. Another maxim.
Windshield time.
Windshield time. All right, let's go to some questions from the audience. We got some here that Brian's curating for us. First one's from Joe. How do you decide what product SKUs are fulfilled directly from your suppliers and bypassing your DCs?
Yeah. So if you think about what Tractor Supply stands for, we want to fulfill those kind of items, have them in the store and in our DCs, ready and accessible at all times. And if you think about it, that's like the head of the assortment. The next would be the body. So we can only have so many items in our stores because there's only so much shelf holding capacity, but there's items in categories that we should own. So like think DeWalt power tools, right? I can only hold so many in a store. I'm gonna hold the most common ones that we can fulfill from our DCs, but in those expanded assortments in our DCs, I can hold more assortment. The other thing is slow moving things that have very sporadic and unpredictable demand patterns, right? So lawnmower blades and mower belts, right? Those are kind of things that people are gonna come in, we can hold upstream. Then there's things that we may want to test or just try and expand our assortment on that we will add to our website. We have 300,000 items on our website.
Yeah.
So obviously the overwhelming majority of those are fulfilled from our vendor base. Right. And so we go through that decision-making cycle, and things will move up and down from head, body to tail, or vice versa, based upon their performance.
Kind of an off-the-wall question, but I've been teaching this metric that some retail organizations use, GMROI, Gimroy or Gimroy, depending upon whether it's a hard or soft G.
Sure.
Gross margin, return on inventory. It's just a hybrid measure of those two inputs, gross margin, inventory turns. Something's high in both, bring it in, right? We'll give it plenty of shelf space. Low in both, get it out of here, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a whole host of in between, right? Is that kind of a logic anyway that
Very
you'd
much
employ?
so. So, like when we talked about metrics earlier, one of the members of the audience here, he sends me a report every single month that has our Gimroy on it, right? For each of those different kind of categories, very much how the decision making side goes. So if that's what you're teaching, it's practice
Okay,
and reward.
cool, good.
He is a Dave Close disciple.
Yeah, there you go.
That's right.
Quick one here for you. What software are you using in demand planning?
Yeah, so I'll break that into two different things. For inventory forecasting or replenishment, we're using a software called Relex. Been very good and pleased with their capabilities and awesome partners. And then for our merchandise financial planning, we're using a system called TM1. What I'm seeing the evolution of over time, though, is that we're making more and more platform decisions for more unified planning than these point solutions for different kind of planning functions. And so I think over the next, like we're talking 10 years from now, I might just say one platform because we'd have the same platform for price and promotion and assortment planning, micro and macro space planning of our assortment footprint in our stores, plus merchandise financial planning, plus the inventory planning. And I'm not saying that one tool can do all those things the best, but the integrations are where the problem happens. And so the more and more platforms we get, I think the better off we'll be as a more integrated supply chain.
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay, how much customization did your ERP require versus out-of-the-box solutions?
A lot.
Yeah.
So we are an SAP shop right now. We are getting ready to go through an SAP upgrade. We have highly customized SAP over the last 24 years, I think. Maybe longer than that we've had this particular version. So it's going to be a significantly emotional event we're about to go through.
Prepare yourself.
We're in the midst of going through that too.
Yeah.
So we feel that pain.
Hey, interesting question there about sustainability goals. We talked about a lot of different metrics and what matters to the customer. Where does sustainability kind of fit in, and how are you all kind of conveying what you're doing to the market?
Sure. So land stewardship and sustainability is important to us. It comes out in a couple different ways. One, this weekend is the opening season of turkey spring season here in Tennessee. So on Saturday morning, I'm going to be leaning against a tree out in West Tennessee. But we have a lot of partnerships with Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited. We do a lot of community service in that way. In our DC design, our DCs are designed to LEED certified standards. And so our two latest DCs are net zero.
Wow.
So we produce as much energy as we consume in those facilities and have designed them in other kinds of ways that are sustainable. From a transportation perspective, for me, it's the double win of when we are more efficient in our transportation network, we reduce carbon. And so while the motives may be different, it's a twofer.
Yeah.
And the thing for me is our team does I think a very good job assessing the upstream network. I'm a follow the money guy. And so in our supply chain, the overwhelming majority of the money we spend is getting product from our vendors through that transportation network into our DCs, not from the DC to the end customer or the store. And so if we follow that money, if we can reduce miles in our inbound network through sourcing optimization, network design, packaging, ordering profiles, rounding of products, all those kind of things, we reduce miles. And the rate I pay on a mile I never drive is zero. And so before I ever talk about rate, let's get rid of miles. And then we reduce the carbon goals. Because of that, we have been, for the last 3 years, selected as a high performer for SmartWay, the EPA program. We've been a long-term participant in that program and been recognized, but the recognitions have just kind of kept on going up. Not necessarily because I'm like, go reduce this amount of carbon, because I'm going, go optimize
Reduce the
network.
miles. Yeah. And something else we didn't touch on, do you all have a private fleet or do you rely on the outsourced market?
For our truckload, we're a heavy truckload shipper. We rely on our carrier partners. For our final mile, we are building out our own final mile network for big, bulky deliveries into these rural environments for customers that require that. So for a final mile delivery, I've been out doing it with our drivers in the past, and they're not just dropping something on somebody's doorstep.
Yeah.
They're having to get through a ranch gate, drive up a half-mile driveway. I did a delivery with a driver who was delivering to the guy who trains all the Belgian Malinois for police forces. Scary dogs, right? And so we're like stacking dog food in there. Next delivery I did was to a lady who lived off grid and needed her fence fixed, and we had to drive off there. And then the very next delivery was to the lady who's trained a couple of Belmont Stakes winners, and you're standing next to a $5 million horse, right? So all those kind of things. It's not like the person just shows up in the Nissan Altima and toss something on your driveway, right? Like we want
They've got some great stories to tell.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Like,
you
but
wanna
we
have a
want
beer
red
with at the end of the
vested
day.
team members out there on people's properties.
Excellent. Very good. Very cool. Here's a question about average to peak seasonality. What does that look like in terms of ebbs and flows in your business? And again, you've got a pretty wide spectrum of products, so something's going to be in season at any point in time.
Well, and I also noted, like, I'm sure that you're taking weather feeds as part of this, this assortment and planning too. And I got a note on my phone this morning that there's going to be snowstorms across the Northeast today. so,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right. So I don't know if you're flying there.
No, I want spring to hit so we can sell spring.
Right. Exactly. But I'm thinking about like snow blowers and snow shovels and things like that. Right.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that about 45% of our product is consumable, usable, and edible. That's very repeatable and highly predictable.
Yeah.
So it does have seasonality and impacts from pricing and promotion, but in general, highly predictable. Our seasonal product is exactly that. And when I say seasonal, I'm not talking about like Valentine's Day is a certain day. I know when that is. Or back to school is this day. It's like, is it going to snow in the Northeast? It
Right.
snowed in Michigan last week. And in Florida, it was 75 degrees,
Yeah.
right? So because our stores have very limited holding capacity, we cannot hide inventory sins. You walk in other home improvement stores and they have 6 levels of racking and these big back rooms. If we miss, we're either out or it's spilling out the sides.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do is we try to set the store with an initial amount that they need to look good and to get through that initial season, and then use the agility of our supply chain to replenish based upon need. So from a kind of peak to average, you'll hear the term if you ever talk to somebody at Tractor Supply, the hockey stick. So as soon as spring hits, grass is going to grow, bugs are going to come out, things are going to break, and the hockey stick of demand comes out. When it's cold, people will go buy safety salt and snow throwers, those kind of things. So we have a mix of both.
Thomas has a question about which TMS you use.
Yeah, so we are from an execution system. We're a Manhattan shop, Manhattan WMS, Manhattan TMS.
Okay. So you mentioned about windshield time, right? In a sense, we all have windshield time here with you today.
Okay.
One of the things that we have, one of our maxims, is that we want everybody that comes to one of our forums to be able to leave with at least one actionable idea when they go. They got a chance to have windshield time here with you today. What is your advice that these folks should be able to take as an actionable idea that they might be able to go back to work on Thursday or Friday or next Monday and start really putting in place in their job?
Yeah. So this may be only me. I don't know. You're probably all better people than I am. But when I go home and I sit down with my wife and I have 4 kids, there's 3 still in the house for dinner. And if I start complaining about something or someone, my wife, in all her sage wisdom, is like, you need to go talk to that person. What are you doing about it? And I would say the things that bother you are opportunities for empathy, understanding, seeking to understand and understand their business drivers. And so the moment you start complaining about those people are doing something, that'd be my idea. Like, if you want to be an enterprise leader, go talk to those people. And that will do wonders for just helping out.
Yeah.
It's not always going to go well. But if you can't handle conflict, you're in the wrong job.
Yeah, you got to have the confidence to be able
courage.
to
I measure
face those conflicts.
I measure my success in the supply chain by who I disappoint the least. And what I mean by that is, we talked about trade-offs a little bit earlier. If I can set an expectation for somebody and disappoint them slightly less than I promised, that probably means I've done a good job. If I walk into a store and they say they have enough inventory, it means they have too much. If I walk into a DC and they're complaining that they have too much variety, right? They want long level lead times. They're probably just about right where they need to be, right? Everybody wants to move everything full truckload all the time and be fully cubed out, right? So it's like all those kind of things. So I kind of gauge where my friction point's at and then like steer into that conflict. And if you love conflict as a combat sport and an intellectual chess game, man, you're in the right game.
There you go.
I think there was your 7th max.
There it is.
Conflict is a combat sport.
Conflict. No, not that one. That might be 8th maximum. No, view every problem as an opportunity.
That's
right?
it.
Yeah.
Be willing to have those conversations.
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, hey, thank you so much for having a conversation with us today, Colin. Just tremendous to have your perspectives and experience brought before the group here. It's a great way to get our forum kicked off today. And thanks also for participating in the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope it's a wonderful rest of the conference for y'all.
Certainly. So we'll just close out. Again, thanks to our listeners out there. At any time, you can reach us here at Rocky Top, Tennessee on Supply Chain Management, GSCI at utk.edu. Ted, why don't you close us out?
Yep. Thank you all for joining us. Again, this is our Tennessee on Supply Chain Management podcast with Colin Yankee, Chief Supply Chain Officer, Tractor Supply. Great time together with you, Colin. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks all.
Go Navy.
I knew you were going to slip that in there.